The views and opinions expressed by the participants on this show are not necessarily those of Stewart Information Services Corporation or Stewart Title. Before you make any investment, you should seek the advice of your investment advisor or attorney.
When it comes to real estate, everything matters. Whether you're a realtor, homeowner, buyer, or seller, Real Estate Matters with Stewart Title is here to inform, entertain, and inspire you. Host Bill Napick from Stewart Title will talk with guests about what really matters when it comes to owning, buying, and selling real estate. Real Estate Matters with Stewart Title starts right now. Here's your host, Bill Napick.
And welcome to the show, Real Estate Matters with Stewart Title. I am your host, Bill Napick, and this is where America tunes in to hear great real estate talk. We are based here in Houston, Texas. You may be listening somewhere else. We know you're going to enjoy the show, as we always have interesting guests and things that relate to real estate, lifestyle, and the home. So we always have some kind of variety to keep you interested, entertained, and informed. So we're so glad you tuned in. As always, we are sponsored by Stewart Insurance and Risk Management and their president, Tom Carpentier. That's where you can get personal insurance like home and auto, umbrella policies. In addition, you could also get commercial insurance. So you just go to Stewart.com and see the full menu of the insurance offerings from Stewart Insurance and Risk Management. Again, that's Stewart.com. In the meantime, I told you we always have interesting guests, and we have kind of a show exclusive here. We had the one and only author. Books are such a big part of the home. We see bookshelves. We know that's a great place to read a book in our quiet time at the end of the day or whenever, both business and fiction books alike. So, not long ago, I got to talk to the one and only New York Times bestselling author, Mr. Stuart Woods. He's had over 43 best-selling novels on the New York Times list. He is a master storyteller. It is a rare opportunity to hear this great author talk on the radio or anywhere else. So it was a great interview. He is Mr. Stuart Woods. He is the creator of Stone Barrington and other great characters. Go to StuartWoods.com for all his books and more. Stuart, thank you and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bill. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I have to tell you, I've been reading your books, I guess, for 30 years. One of the first ones that comes to mind was Dead in the Water, where I was introduced to your great character, Stone Barrington.
Yes.
And that is so awesome. And you've written so many Stone Barrington novels since then, right?
Yes, this is number 36, I think.
36. It
My
is.
statistician informs me.
That's right. Well, you have so many books out there, Stuart, and it's so awesome to have you on the show. Thank you again.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to tell you that the book is number one on both the New York Times bestseller list and the USA Today list.
And now that book is Scandalous Behavior, your newest book.
Yes.
That is so great. You always have a great plot. The characters are so good. But one of the things that I think about is, especially with Stone Barrington, you put so much detail in that just what he does day to day and throughout the plot of the book is so exciting and interesting, and the detail comes right through.
Well, thank you.
How do you do that?
Well, he leads a very detailed life. All I have to do is describe it.
And indeed you do. And even when he just goes shopping or when he has his meals, to me that is so distinctive and makes it so interesting for the reader.
Well, I want to make it as real as possible for the reader, and I think that helps.
Indeed. Now, Stuart, tell us, what was the first book, the first Stone Barrington book that you wrote?
The first one was called New York Dead.
So
that was more years ago than I care to think about. At that time, Stone was still on the NYPD as a homicide detective, although before the book is out, he's an attorney.
That's right. Now, to even create the character Stone Barrington, what was your inspiration and how did he evolve in the first book?
Well, I'll tell you how that happened. I had read a piece in the New York Times about how cats can fall from a great height and land on concrete and not be killed, maybe injured, but not killed. And the way they do that is they assume what's called the flying squirrel position, spread eagle, and they present the maximum amount of their body surface to the wind, and that slows down their terminal velocity, which you will remember from high school physics.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a human being who falls would reach a terminal velocity of 120 miles an hour, a cat would hit about half of that and would be falling more slowly and therefore would survive. So I thought, what if a woman, a beautiful woman, maybe a famous beautiful woman, fell from a great height and she'd had some skydiving experience and she assumed the spread eagle position, and maybe she's wearing a nightgown that slows her down a little bit, and maybe she falls into a pile of dirt left there by the public utility. Would she have a chance of surviving? And I needed a character to witness that event and to solve the mystery surrounding it. And so I invented Stone Barrington just on the fly.
Wow. And he indeed is a great character, but not only that, the characters that you have throughout all the books, and it's interesting, like I'm even thinking about Holly Barker. When Holly Barker, you had her stand alone on a few books, but also she enters and is weaved into Stone's world too. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, she's an important part of Stone's life, and so she does pop up every now and then. In fact, when my publisher told me that he wanted me to do 4 books a year and he wanted them all to be Stone Barrington books, I tricked him by bringing in all the other characters from the other books, and he said he didn't mind being tricked that way, so it worked out okay.
And as we talked about originally, we talk about great detail, and your descriptive writing is just tremendous. I think one of the things that's happened in reading, and I want to hear what your take is, and that is, unlike the movies or a TV show, the book is so beautiful because what happens in that comes from your mind, the writer, and it comes into our mind's eye. So we see these characters. We see Holly Barker. We see Stone Barrington with our own eye. That just makes it fascinating.
Well, I try and let the reader fill in on a lot of the detail. I'm really a minimalist as a writer, and I don't spend a lot of time on elaborate descriptions. I think if I give the reader just enough to fire his imagination, then he'll fill in the blanks.
And you're certainly doing that. In fact, I love the Holly Barker, but going back to Dead in the Water, I think that was the one where Stone's on a boat, and he has his love interest at the time was going to join him, but she never did because she went with another guy.
Yep.
But Stone is so resilient, no big deal. Here comes another opportunity and another adventure.
Well, that particular incident changed his life because, unbeknownst to Stone, he doesn't discover this until later, the old girlfriend is pregnant when she goes off with the other guy. So that brings up a whole new series of plot twists in the coming books.
Well, Stewart, how long does it take when you plan, let's say, first of all, to plan a new book, how long does it take to plan the book, and then how long does it take to write one of your books?
Well, I don't plan it. I improvise it. I start with a scene that leads me to another scene. Then I review the previous day's work and make small corrections. That catapults me into the next scene, and I keep inventing scenes and chapters until I reach about chapter 50, and then I start looking for a way out of the corner I painted myself into, and so far I've always found a way out.
Yeah, you certainly have. Now, how long do you plan a certain amount of time for your
Well, it took
publishing?
me 8 years to write my first book, but that was a very bad case of first novelist writer's block. After that, I began to pick up the pace, and I began writing a book every other year. And in the beginning, I worked about 4 hours a day to write a chapter, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. And as I moved along and gained experience and confidence is very important, I began working a little faster without really trying. And I cut that down to 3 hours and then 2 hours a day. And I had been writing a book every other year, and then I had a revelation that if I wrote a book every year, that I would be paid twice as much, or at least twice as often, which was almost as good. And I suggested to my publisher that I write a book every year, and then I suggested 2 books a year, and my publisher balked at that. He said, if you write more than 1 book a year, people will stop reading your books. They'll get tired of you. And I said, is that what happened to Danielle Steele and Stephen King and Joyce Carol Oates? And he said, well, those are all exceptions. So at that point, I told my agent to find me another publisher, and we found Putnam, who were happy to have 2 books a year. And at the time that I like to travel, which is the spring and autumn, because my wife and I fly ourselves in a light jet, and we like to have the best weather that we can for those trips. So after a while, my publisher took me to lunch one day, and he said, "Would you consider writing a third book every year?" And I said, "Yes."
Wow.
And that worked out very well. And then finally he suggested a fourth book. And now I'm writing 4 books a year. It takes me about 2 months. I write every day, 7 days a week from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., 1 hour, and I write a chapter during that time. And when I get 60 chapters or so, I've got a book.
Wow. Well, one of the things as you talk about your aviation, because you fly planes, right, Stuart?
Right, we do.
Well, in going to the character Teddy Fay, now one of the things about Teddy, and I think the thing that's exciting about him is that he, for a while there, he was changing his identity. He had his plane, he'd put different numbers on it, but it's like here's a guy that knew when to get out, and he had that down to a science. That too is a fascinating character.
Well, Teddy was a fugitive for many years, and then something happened in his life that changed that. I don't want to let the readers know too much. They should discover that in the books. And he is able to settle down with one identity in one very attractive place.
But he also, I loved how he had that down to an art. When it was time for him to leave as that fugitive, he had it down and he was gone.
He was always ready. He had a plan.
Well, and the other thing I think about too, as I know that you're an aviator, sometimes I and maybe other readers do this too, but they see you and they imagine what your life is like, and some people probably see you as Stone Barrington out there.
I'm afraid a great many people do, but Stone is taller, handsomer, and luckier than I am.
Well, I'm reading the book right now, Foreign Affairs. I think I have about 80 pages. I'm reading that. That is also a great book, and I mean, he always has exciting adventures everywhere he goes.
Yes. Well, it wouldn't be good for either me or the readers if his adventures weren't exciting.
Do people ever ask you how old is Stone Barrington at this point?
Well, he was in his late 30s when the series began, but now he's in his early 40s, and he's going to remain right there.
So it's kind of like dialing back the odometer on our car.
Right.
That is great.
His age is frozen in time.
Now, that is great. One of the things, too, I like that you, and I think you filled in the blanks for me a little bit in that you say you write minimalistically so that when I read those words, to me, they're so descriptive, and then I take what I read there, and I guess I add so much to it and digest and consume it so much that it's so exciting to read, and it just keeps the pages turning.
Well, that's what I aim for.
Now, go back before your first book. When did you know in life that you wanted to be an author, Stuart?
Oh, I think when I was 9 or 10. When I was about 10, I was rummaging in a closet in my grandmother's house, and I discovered in a shoebox full of old photographs and things a policeman's badge that was half shot away with buckshot and still had some dried blood on it. And then I took it to the only adult in the house at the time. It was my great-aunt Ruby, and she explained to me that it had belonged to my maternal grandfather, who had been a cotton farmer in Georgia in the 19-teens and had lost his farm to the boll weevil, like many others. And through a personal contact with a friend, he got a job as the first chief of police in a small southern town that was only a few years old at that time. And eventually he was killed in the line of duty, and she told me that story, and it stuck in my mind. And then from that time on, I always thought about writing a book about that, and that's what my first novel was about.
Wow, that's right. I could remember the cover of that with the police badge on it, right?
Uh-huh.
Now, one of the things when we talk about covers, how important, I know I look at the covers and they draw me in, and I'm sure they draw other people in, but as the author, do you even think about what the cover's going to look like, or do you have input into that?
The publisher, my editor rather, always writes to me and asks me if I have any suggestions, and sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. I just tell them to have the designer read the book and think of something, and I have a contractual approval over those covers, so sometimes I accept them and sometimes I make requests for changes, and sometimes I reject them and tell them to start over. And finally, when everybody's happy, then that's the cover.
Right. Now, also, one of the things, as people think about the Stone Barrington character, at least when I do, one of the things that's great is the love interest he has as he goes along, but also he eats some great food, and he's accustomed to a super lifestyle.
Well, the two go hand in hand to Stone. over dinner is a great place to get to know a woman, so that works out very well.
And right, that's right. The dinner, and like the books start out.
Elaine's late. That worked right up until the time when Elaine died, and I had to stop saying that because the restaurant closed about 6 months later.
Right. But once again, I have to say, people probably see Stone Barrington and Stuart Woods sometimes as, but I'm sure you like to have good food, right, Stuart?
Absolutely.
Give the listeners also an idea what lies ahead. Say the book right now, your newest book is Scandalous Behavior. So tell us what lies ahead after that book, Stuart.
Well, I think the next one after that must be Family Jewels, and tomorrow I'll finish the book after that, which is called Dishonorable Intentions. So right now I publish in January, April, July, and October is the way it's been working out. That will continue, so there will be a constant supply of books to read.
Now, when you take that hour per day and write consistently every day, and I guess that means every day, right? Saturday, Sunday, the whole thing.
It does, yeah, 7 days a week.
What is the discipline that's involved, and what kind? Do you have to have a certain atmosphere? Do you sit at a computer, the same place all the time? What happens?
All I need is an hour of solitude and a computer and reasonable quiet in the house. So I live in 3 places, and I eventually write something in all of them.
So there you go. Having that quiet time is very important. So you have it down to an art and a science, and boy, you are so gifted, Mr. Woods. I know people out there are listening, and they say, "Man, we got to hear Stuart Woods today on the radio show talk about
very kind of you.
His characters." And
I'd like them to know that the book Scandalous Behavior is in the bookstores as we speak, and it's number 1 on the bestseller list. And I hope that everybody will go in and buy a copy.
Indeed. Now, let me ask you this. When a book is number 1, that has to be just such a great feeling. And after writing so many books, do you still get super excited about it?
Yes. I'm always pleased when they come out. And this is, it took me 15 novels before I made the bestseller list. But since that time, I've had 47 uninterrupted bestsellers without a break. And that pleases me very much.
That is very exciting. And I think also to know, certainly the success that you've enjoyed, but also to know the difference in people's lives that you make when they read their books.
Well, that's what they tell me when I get emails from them, and I'm always pleased to hear that.
Well, when you get the feedback, and that, I guess with the internet and emails and things, that's how I reached out to you. But when you get that feedback, what are the things that people want to know the most, or do you hear a consistent theme there?
Well, when I first started the website, which is 20 years ago, I discovered that people tended to ask the same questions. So what I asked people to do, as I think I gave them a month, was to send me all the questions that they would like to know answers to. And then I made a list of those, and I composed an interview for the website, which consisted of the questions that people answered. And that way I don't have to repeatedly answer the same questions over and over again.
And that's great. And also, we want to tell people, StuartWoods.com is the website. They can go to that beautiful website. You can see all the books there. And just Google Stuart Woods if you don't get that. Just StuartWoods.com.
That works.
Now, also, tell us a little bit about Holly Barker.
Holly is now the National Security Advisor to the President of the United States after a career first in the Army, then as a police officer, and then in the CIA. And she leads an extremely interesting life. She's very busy. She doesn't have as much time for Stone as she used to.
Mm. Well, and also, I think one of the books, I don't know if it was her first appearance, I think it was Orchid Beach. I kind of remember something about that with a bag of money in the tree or something.
That was in one of the books, yes.
Orchid Beach, and then there was a scene with her in the bank, and her boyfriend, I think, got shot.
Right, and Stone Barrington happened to be in the bank on that occasion, and they met shortly after that.
And boy, once again, I go back to thinking about Stone Barrington, all the characters, and the visual that you create with the words that you put on the page. It's magnificent, it's exciting. And I mean, do you get the excitement as you sit back and let's take that hour per day? Do you review right when you're finished at the end of the hour, or do you look at it the next day?
I look at it the next day. I let it cool off a bit, and then I make nearly always small changes. Occasionally I'll add a paragraph.
You probably get this question a lot. If there's someone out there, young or old, that wants to be an author, I know it's at the end of your books, but if someone wants to be an author, what is the best advice that you'd give somebody?
My advice is to write something. It's amazing how many people who want to be writers forget to do that. They dream about having bestsellers and films made and so forth. But you really have to sit down, apply your bottom to the chair, and write something, and then it can begin.
That's right. Well, boy, encourage people to get Scandalous Behavior. It's out right now. Also, you can get that on the iBooks as well, right, Stuart?
Right.
So that's also a great way. Now, let me ask you this: when you read a book, do you, as a writer, do you have time to read other books?
I read mostly history and biography, and I don't read in my own genre at all because I'm very impressionable. I think it would be a terrible thing to even inadvertently steal somebody else's idea, and it would be even worse to get caught doing it. So I avoid reading my own genre.
Right. And also, as you travel, I guess you would take notes as you're traveling and apply some of those things to the books?
I don't take notes. I have a good memory, and my theory is that if I can remember something, it's worth using, and if I forget it, it probably wasn't worth using. That's
right. Boy, in fact, just some of the things I've mentioned about previous older books, you remember all those parts about it. So that's fascinating. Stone Barrington. Now, are there going to be any books anytime soon that are not Stone Barrington books?
Well, it will always say a Stone Barrington novel on the cover, but it will always contain other characters from my past books as well. Ed Eagle, Will and Kate Lee, Holly Barker, a whole list of people.
Mr. Woods, what else would you like to tell the listeners here in Houston and those that listen on the Internet?
Well, next time I'm in Houston, come out to the bookstore and get a copy signed. I won't make the spring tour in Houston, but maybe in the fall.
Well, we would love that. And also on your website, you do show where you are touring and where you're going to be, right?
I do.
Well, we will look forward to that. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Stuart Woods. Mr. Woods, thank you so much. You have a great fan right here. And all the listeners that are out there, I think you do as well. Once again, the internet or the bestseller right now on the New York Times is Scandalous Behavior. Stuart Woods. Thank you, Mr. Woods.
Thank you, Bill. It was fun.
Very nice. Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Stewart Title has been serving Texas for over 120 years. A Texas treasure, Stewart Title's longevity is a testimony to superior service, innovation, and knowing what their customers want. Recent surveys show that 92% of respondents want secure online tracking tools to help them during the closing process. Stewart Title offers the most robust and secure system to track transactions online available today. To learn more, contact Stewart Title at one of their many offices around the city. Stewart Title, online at Stewart.com. That's STEWART.com. Please welcome Stewart Title's National Sales Manager, Mick Goodenough. As you know, sales professionals must keep learning. The Sales Professor is in. Here's Sales Minutes with Mick.
The professor is in. Mick, welcome to the show.
Great to be here again, Bill.
How do you like that, the sales professor?
I took to it like a duck to water.
Well, because we have to constantly be learning in sales, and certainly as we reach out and realtors all across the nation hopefully hear the show, real estate professionals, but also sales professionals everywhere. That's why I think this is such an important segment. Tell us what you want to talk about today.
Well, today I want to talk about prospecting. And when you ask a room full of salespeople who loves to prospect, you'd be surprised at how very few hands go up because prospecting represents some fear and trepidation, and ultimately people focus on the idea that there's going to be rejection out there. And so getting rejected is not something that people are naturally gravitating towards. But you have to have a really healthy mindset to prospect. And as a sales professional, prospecting has to be a key part of your game.
There's no question about it. But and you mentioned it very well because nobody likes rejection. But certainly in the sales world, we're going to have rejection come upon us maybe frequently, but it's really a numbers game too, right?
It's absolutely a numbers game. It's interesting when we talk about, I've trained many escrow officers as well in some sales techniques, and when I ask them what would you feel like at the end of the day if you went out in the field and told no 8 times out of 10, and sometimes heck no, get out of my office, what would you? They'd feel awful. I wouldn't know what to do. I said, well, a sales rep looks at that and says 20% market share because I got 2 yeses. So this is really the idea. And the other thing is I quote Zig Ziglar quite a bit, a terrific resource and inspiration. He always likes to say is they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting your offer at the time. So you have to separate the personal from what the professional is in that one.
Well, what would you say to someone that, other than maybe you ought to be in another profession if they don't like rejection, but what would you say to encourage someone if they say, look, I've got to do my marketing today and I need to see, I'm going to reach out to 10 prospects one way or another. And what encouragement would you give them to have them go forth?
Well, first of all, I would have them define what their prospecting activities are and are not. I mean, many people do things that they believe are prospecting, and they fall more under lead generation. I've had reps say, hey, I had a great day prospecting, and they went out and got 6 business cards from lenders who weren't even in their offices. That's not prospecting. That's a kind of a weaker form of lead generation. The other thing is I think no matter what, you should have 3 or 4 standard questions that you ask every prospect so that when going into every meeting, you have some confidence about what you're going to ask and talk about. You're not having to think about it on the fly or make it up. 3 or 4 standard questions that get some deep information from your prospect that can lead the conversation forward. That's really the big one. It's a system. I like to say prospecting is all about movement. You're trying to move someone from not really knowing about you to ultimately trusting you to help make a decision for them.
And let's go back to that. I think that's very important. You said, and it comes under the idea of being prepared and being ready. Have things ready to say without thinking on the fly.
Absolutely.
Give us an example, if you would.
Well, for instance, in our training, we use the three questions of the sales interview. And the first question we like to ask somebody is after we meet them and introduce ourselves is, when you can direct a transaction, where do you go most often? And that gets them to talk about their favorite experience, if it's not with Stewart. And then
So that's like a business development person for a title company like Stewart asking a realtor.
Absolutely. Sitting in front of a realtor, where do you go most often? And what we really want to know is the experience they're having with that particular company. And the second question we said, what do they do that keeps you coming back? So what the answers to those questions is you're going to start gaining some understanding of what your prospect likes and probably doesn't like about the experience of dealing with a title company. And this is really important information. So if you go in there knowing you're going to ask these questions, it's important. And the third question we always ask is if you could add one thing to what you're currently getting, what would that one thing be? Because ultimately, we know this as buyers ourselves, there's something that you would add to any buying experience, and you just have to have that drawn out. And then if we can offer that extra, then we can start talking about some future opportunities with the customer or the prospect.
Exactly. Now, that's from the title perspective. Let's say you're a real estate professional out there trying to, and here in Houston, I just heard the number the other day, there's 30,000 realtors, and certainly not all of them are active, but let's just say there's a lot of realtors. If you were a realtor out there, what do you think maybe one or some of the questions you would be to get someone to think about you to differentiate yourself so they choose you?
It's interesting. My mom was a realtor for 30 years, and she always began the conversation when she was going on a listing appointment with asking him, what is your favorite thing about this house? What would you tell someone that you love about this house? And that helps kind of define the beginning of the description of the house when it goes out for a listing. And it really played into the narrative that my mom wanted to weave to get people to be attracted to that listing. So those type of questions, the emotional questions, I think help begin the process of putting that house on the market. So those I always really loved those very, very much.
Sounds like your mom was an interesting person. She knew a lot of stuff, I bet, right?
She sure did. Yeah, she had an interesting and varied career, and now thankfully is enjoying retirement. But she loved real estate. 31 years as a realtor, and now I grew up essentially in my business life watching her. The slings and arrows. It's a very, very tough profession, and I have a huge respect for all realtors.
It is not easy, but and you also mentioned a word there: the emotions. Stirring up emotions is a very important part of the sales process.
There is no doubt about it. We say every time that people make the buying decision based on emotion and back it up with logic or fact. And people would say, well, how emotional can it be to buy a title policy? But the idea is this is really about the closing experience, and there's a lot of emotion to it, as our realtor guest, I'm sure, could tell you in numerous fashions. It's a very emotional process. There's a lot of fear. There's excitement. There's all of these. And I tell people in the title business, if you've ever talked to an upset customer, you know that there's emotion in what we do as well. So you have to appeal to that emotion and know that's what the buying decision is all about.
No doubt about it. Well, Mick, tell us some more. Prospecting tips before we close our segment. What else should we know?
Well, listen, you got to go in with confidence. You need to follow up. You need to also treat yourself well as what is a successful prospecting outcome. What we say in the title business is most people think that the successful prospecting outcome is I got a deal. But there are many steps before that. You can have someone who is negative or neutral about the company, and you move them to positive. You move them to a better feeling about what you're doing, getting them closer. That's a successful prospecting day. And we really want people to just not beat themselves up if they don't get the deal or they don't get the listing. But if they moved the process forward, you've had a successful prospecting day.
Another thing I would bring forth, you are the national sales manager for Stewart Title, as we are a national company and international, in fact. But prior to that position, you were a training machine, so you know a lot about training. So that comes into play so much.
Absolutely, it's my real passion. For the previous 2 years, I was the national sales trainer, and I've been in this business 27 years. I love it. I love the idea of what we provide and the great working relationships we have with our realtors and lenders and builders out there. It's been a hugely rewarding thing. But training to me, it's something that I believe everybody not only needs but wants deep down. Even our top producing BDOs in the country love to come to training and love to hear about
business
training.
Development officer for those that are not in the title business. Mick, how can people learn more?
Well, they can go to Stewart.com and learn a lot more. They can email me directly, mgoodenough@Stewart.com, and love to talk to people. I love exchanging ideas about sales.
Very nice. Thank you, Professor.
Most people don't know that Stewart offers business, home, and auto insurance. In fact, Stewart Insurance and Risk Management has been doing that and more for over 10 years. And they partner with many leading insurance companies to offer great rates. They're a national insurance agency operating in all 50 states, delivering a broad range of insurance products. Whether you need a home insurance quote for a client's home closing or your own insurance needs, you can count on them. Call 866-845-4676. That's 866-845-4676. Stewart Insurance and Risk Management is here to help.
The title business, real estate, the American dream, and today we are very pleased to have the sales director for Houston, Texas of Stewart Title. Her name is Betty Warren. And Betty, thank you and welcome to the show.
Well, hi, Bill. Thank you.
First of all, Betty, a lot of people, there are so many real estate transactions that take place all over the world, the United States, but certainly Houston, Texas, as we've had such an exciting market. But tell people, buyers and sellers, when they go to that closing table, they know title companies from the closing table. When the closing takes place, they just want to get the keys and they want to get their check. Tell people about what actually happens with the title process.
Well, Bill, there's a lot of things that happen with the title process. I think probably the number one thing is that we are very, very fortunate to be the people who preside over the actual closing, and we're the ones who get to fulfill that American dream that you just mentioned. The lender, the real estate agent, the buyer, the seller, they've been working on the transaction for several weeks, sometimes a month or two. And when they get to us, it's the day that they're actually going to get those keys, as you said, and walk away. We've been busy since the time that sales contract was brought to us, verifying that the taxes have been paid, verifying that the owner is as represented on the contract, looking at the documents to make sure that there aren't going to be any defects in the title when that happy family takes possession of their new home.
And it's interesting, there are so many components to the process, as you've described a few. It's almost like making a Swiss watch. I can see the pieces fit together in a precise way. And again, the culmination is that real estate closing.
It is. It's definitely a ballet performance.
Well, tell people, Betty, about Stewart Title. Certainly we have a great heritage right here in Texas and in Houston, Texas, but tell people some of the things they may not know about Stewart Title.
Well, of course, we are the hometown title company. We're the fourth largest title company in the nation. Began down in 1893 in Galveston, Texas. Our beautiful historic building still there, still operated every day at 222 Kempner. From there, the family came into Houston in the late 50s and then started to expand across the state, across the nation, and ultimately around the world. We operate in about 40 countries now around the world, as well as all the states of the United States. Right here locally, we have 36 offices spread across 5-county area, and we're set up to meet the needs of every type of buyer, and that's in Houston a wide variety. Title itself is still run by the fifth generation Morris. Mr. Matt Morris is our CEO right here in Houston, Texas, as well as Mr. Stuart Morris Sr., who still can be seen at 1980 Post Oak a couple of times a week, sometimes wearing his Stewart plaid jacket.
That's right. And he looks great in that jacket.
He does. He is an inspiration to all of us.
1893. Now, I'm not that great at math, but that's over 122 years ago.
It is. October the 16th will roll into yet another year.
That is a long time. Well, also, going back to that real estate closing, Betty, what should people know about the protection that a title policy provides? Because I don't think they always think about it, and they just think it's one of the components of the closing, and then they just move on. But how does that title policy protect the buyer?
Well, one of the first things we want to think about, of course, is the cost. And with a title policy, you pay it one time, and it's in effect for the amount of the policy as long as the purchaser owns the property or their immediate heirs. And what that means, Bill, is that if a claim arises against the title, such as an outstanding heir may show up, or a back due taxes may get presented, then the title policy is there to defend the owner against those claims. And the claims are varied. You know, actually, when I read the list, sometimes I get kind of scared myself. Documents that have been executed under false or expired powers of attorney. We protect against undisclosed heirs, defects in acknowledgments, gaps in the chain of title, deeds that might have been issued by minors, various community property issues, utility easements, special tax assessments, rights of divorced parties. Gosh, do I need to go on?
Wow, there's a lot.
List.
Well, we could tell people to go to Stewart.com and they can see all those things and more. And you really just scratched the surface, but the protection that you get from the title policy is huge, and it stays with that owner as long as they own the home, right? They pay that premium once.
As long as they own it, and Bill, as long as their immediate heirs own it.
Well, now, Betty, I told everyone you are the sales director supreme of Houston. You are tremendous at your job, and you inspire business development officers all over this city. Tell people about your role just briefly and what the business development officer is.
Well, of course, I have the best job in the company. Houston is a wonderful market to work in real estate. It's especially wonderful to be working for Stewart Title. We have a sales team of 15 professionals that work across the 5-county area, from the Woodlands out to Katy, Sugar Land, down to Lake Jackson, Galveston, over to Clear Lake, up to Tascasita, Kingwood, and all parts in between. As business development officers, our sales team is looking for ways to assist the realtor and add value to the transaction. It's a very emotional time purchasing a property. It's a very cumbersome and lengthy ordeal in the state of Texas, and our job is to do everything we can to make it as smooth and pleasant for the consumer, for the ultimate purchaser or the seller, as we can, and assist both the lender, the realtor, and every party to the transaction.
And there are many title companies in Houston, Betty, and there are many distinctions, I would say, with Stewart Title. But one of those distinctions are the business development officers that are around the city. In fact, I'm honored to be one of those 15 you mentioned. So it is a great position, and we are one of the distinctions of doing business with Stewart Title, right?
Absolutely. It's the people that make the difference. And just, if you just go back to that 1893 and you say, wow, how does a company continue to be viable for that many years run by the same family? How does it continue to be they continue to be at the top of their game, have a powerful market share? How do we have employees? There's many people in our sales team, Bill, that have been here 15, 20 years.
Indeed.
Our escrow officers, some of them over 30 years. When you have associates who stay with a company that long, it's because it's a wonderful company to work for. They treat the employees wonderful, and the customers also enjoy coming back.
Very nice. And Betty, I want to say, as you mentioned, the seasoned business development people at Houston, I want to mention two brand new ones, if I could. And at our Heights office in the center of the city, we have Megan Henderson, and you could reach people at the Heights at 713-401-1850. Great real estate transactions taking place there. Megan is going to tear it up. And in our memorial office, where I office, the great Natasha Livingston. How about those two individuals?
Oh, amazing. We are so thrilled to have both those ladies on the sales team. Both of them bring a new dimension to our group, and I am looking forward to watching them blossom and grow.
And as I am. And also our memorial office is 713-468-8900. Ladies and gentlemen, Betty Warren, Sales Director with Stewart Title Houston. Thank you, Betty, for being on the show.
My pleasure. You have a great time today, and we'll be looking forward to seeing all these listeners at the closing table.
If you've been in the real estate industry for any length of time, you know unexpected and costly events can happen. Safeguard yourself against the unexpected with Real Estate Errors and Omissions Insurance, or E&O, through Stewart Insurance and Risk Management. Not all E&O insurance policies are created equal. How confident are you that your current E&O policy fully protects you? Stewart Insurance and Risk Management offers expertise in the real estate industry and tailors your coverage to correctly manage your risk. With Stewart Insurance and Risk Management, facing the unexpected just became a lot easier. Safeguard your future with real estate E&O insurance through Stewart Insurance and Risk Management. Call today at 866-845-4676. That's 866-845-4676. Or email us at stewartinsurance@stewart.com to request tailored insurance options for you and your business.
Most people don't know that Stewart offers business, home, and auto insurance. In fact, Stewart Insurance and Risk Management has been doing that and more for over 10 years. And they partner with many leading insurance companies to offer great rates. They're a national insurance agency operating in all 50 states, delivering a broad range of insurance products. Whether you need a home insurance quote for a client's home closing or your own insurance needs, you can count on them. Call 866-845-4676. That's 866-845-4676. Stewart Insurance and Risk Management is here to help.
Please welcome Stewart Title's National Sales Manager, Mick Goodenough. As you know, sales professionals must keep learning. The Sales Professor is in. Here's Sales Minutes with Mick.
And here he is, Mick Goodenough, the Sales Professor. Welcome, Mick.
Great to be back, Bill.
Always great. And we always want to learn things because sales, like everything else, we're always learning, and there's so many things we need to know. Tell us what you want to bring forth today, Mick.
Well, what we're talking about today is what I call the 4 fears of a new customer. In our sales efforts at Stewart and in many sales people's efforts, you prospect, and you take a prospect through the process, getting them to the point where you're asking for the transaction. You want to do a deal with them. And which is a great day. That's a day to celebrate. But what I've found throughout my career and in talking with many sales reps and many realtors is that there's a set of fears that sets in. Some would call them concerns. I like to call them fears. And those have an impact. And we need to know about those going in so that we can help mitigate those, communicate through them so that we make people feel very, very good about their decision to give us a transaction.
And when we talk about these fears, these are the fears that a salesperson has when the prospect is ready to say yes
This is the actual fears of the prospect when they say
okay.
yes. So when the new customer says yes, to me, there's a series of 4 fears that they can go through typically. And we need to know, as the person asking them for the new order, establishing that new relationship, what those are.
So it's always a great thing to know what the other person is thinking or imagine what they're thinking and put ourselves in their place. So as we talk to this prospect, what are the things that they may be thinking? What fears or reservations might they have? You mentioned there's 4.
There's 4. So you remember that they have an existing relationship or existing relationships with some escrow providers, title providers. And so now they're going to give us a shot. So the first fear that they typically have is, what if it goes wrong? Okay, first deal with us. It's a natural thing. They have an established pattern with their provider, their current relationship. So the first fear is, what if it goes wrong? And in many instances, if we've done our homework and we've talked to them and really gotten to know them through the prospecting process, we can mitigate those fears, because we should know by that time exactly how they want their escrows to go. So that's typically the first fear, is what if it goes wrong? And the secondary part of that is, will it reflect badly with their customers that they chose us if it does indeed go wrong?
And or their management or associates, right?
All of that.
And of course, this applies to any industry. They're going to say, what if it goes wrong? What is the second fear there, or reservation they may have?
Well, the second fear is, what if it goes great? Because they didn't come into this thinking, I want to establish a brand new relationship, or I want to add to my vendor list. I mean, most people who are buying, most prospects who are going after, don't wake up in the morning saying, I'm looking forward to adding a new vendor to my rotation. They just don't think this. That's what we do. We come in and work with them and consult with them to see if we have something that they can use and need in their business. So if it goes great, it immediately leads to the third fear, which is, if it goes great, they're going to ask me for another deal, additional business. And so those two are really intimately tied. And we have to know that and remember that. And that's a great thing, because obviously people want to keep using something that went very, very well, or that they felt good about.
And certainly from the salesperson's perspective, these are things that we want. We've worked theoretically. Now, there are some things that happen quickly, but there's a lot of business that we go after that takes a long time to get. So these are all good things, but now it's the moment where they say, hey, we want to be on board with you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And listen, there's exceptions to the rule. There's times when somebody's just tickled to do business with you. Maybe they're new to the business. Maybe they've had a rough run with their current company and they're ready for a change. But we're talking about the typical transaction where somebody has an established relationship or relationships, and we're working into that. We're consulting with them, and we're developing that rapport and building towards that moment when they say yes. So the first 3 fears, they go through fairly quickly. What if it goes wrong? What if it goes great? And then they're going to ask me for more business. And so then we have the final fear, and this is a big one, is if it goes great and I do end up wanting to give them more business, I'm going to have to tell my existing provider at some point that I have an additional vendor that I will be using.
That's the breakup.
That's the it is in many respects, because this is a relationship. It's a business relationship, but the emotions are very similar, with at least what I've found in my career. Is you get to that point where you have to have that conversation, and that is just not a conversation that many people look forward to. But at the end of the day, if it's a good business decision, then that's what carries the day. And so if we've established in their mind through multiple transactions, 2 or 3 transactions, that we are a vendor of quality, that there's someone we want to carry forth with, they ultimately have that discussion. Typically, it leads to, I'm going to give them a few deals and I'm going to keep doing business with you. But if it goes better and better and better, and we surpass the service levels that even they're expecting, then we're ultimately going to get more of that business. And you have to have that, what we might even call the breakup conversation. But it is important to remember that.
That's interesting. And of course, as you said in the beginning, sometimes they're coming to us or agreeing to our services because they're upset with that other vendor. And so the breakup in that case may not be so bad for them.
May not be so bad. But again, what's interesting about that is, and I've counseled many sales reps, is you have a lot of lifting to do even after getting one of those deals where someone is upset with their current provider. They come to us. That's a very emotional decision. They come to us. We have to do a very good job exceeding all expectations, because if not, then you get the boomerang effect, because typically what happens is anger is a short-lived thing. Frustration tends to be short-lived. They may get over it and boomerang back to their original provider. So we still need to apply ourselves very well, mostly get to know them and what they love about their current provider, what they really enjoy about working with them, and make sure that we can not only deliver that, but more.
That is a good point, and that brings up, of course, the subject of exceeding expectations. And we have to always be mindful throughout the sales process as we're working with someone try to understand certainly what they're looking for, what they like now, and again, delivering that, but then exceeding those expectations.
That's certainly the case. And there's no way to know what those expectations are unless you ask about them and ask very specific questions. And in our sales training, we train our reps on a short list but very important questions to get this information out, because if we do not deeply know what drives them and what pleases them in an escrow transaction, then we can't establish expectations, therefore we can't exceed them. So we can't fly on what we believe our best customers want. We have to find out what that prospect wants so that they will make the switch.
So what you're saying, Mick, questions are important?
Questions are the greatest. You have to, yeah, absolutely. You know, it's the old saying, you have two ears and one mouth, and you should use them in proportion, and that's exactly what we're talking about, asking very good questions that you get great information back from.
And most likely in any profession, you could kind of boil those questions down to concise and very important questions. Like you don't have to ask 20 questions, right?
No,
Maybe
you
about
don't.
3 or 4.
We actually, what we call the sales interview is 3 questions, and the questions are very simple. The first question is when you can direct a transaction, where do you go most often? And by the way, these were developed by my mentor, Daryl Turner, out in California. But where do you go most often? So we want to find out where they like to go. We don't like to ask who, because that implies an emotional connection to a person.
So choice of words is very important.
Very important. The second question is what do they do that keeps you going back? We typically don't want to ask what most salespeople ask at that point, and that is, why do you go there? Why do you use them? Well, they've already told you why if they say who. So we want to say, where do you go? What do they do that keeps you going back? Because then you're going to get a list of actions and activities and approaches that you can utilize and take back to your escrow department and say, here's what it's going to take just to meet expectations. Then the third question, which is a great one, is if you could add one thing to what you're currently getting, what would that one thing be? And that's really like wave a magic wand, let's add something to what you're currently getting. And therefore, we're not asking them to change, because no one likes to change. No one embraces change automatically. And like I said before, no one wakes up in the morning thinking, today's the day I'm going to change my title company. We have to really leverage into this. So this is the whole point. Simple questions. Now, from those, there are definite follow-up questions, but it's gauged based on the responses of the prospect. It's all based around the prospect's information, not us going in and telling them all the great things about Stewart.
Very nice, Mick, the sales professor and sales psychologist, if I might add. Mick, tell people how they can learn more, please.
You can learn more about Stewart at Stewart.com, and then my email address is mgoodenough@Stewart.com. Feel free to email me, ask me anything you'd like.
Thank you, Professor.
Most people don't know that Stewart offers business, home, and auto insurance. In fact, Stewart Insurance and Risk Management has been doing that and more for over 10 years. And they partner with many leading insurance companies to offer great rates. They're a national insurance agency operating in all 50 states, delivering a broad range of insurance products. Whether you need a home insurance quote for a client's home closing or your own insurance needs, you can count on them. Call 866-845-4676. That's 866-845-4676. Stewart Insurance and Risk Management is here to help.
And thank you for listening to Real Estate Matters with Stewart Title. Your host, Bill Nampick. Show number 119 is concluded, but you can hear any and all the shows. They live on 24/7 at Stewart.com/Houston. Until next week, again, Stewart.com/Houston. Until next week, we'll see you then.